Hey y'all, hi. So the Natasha Denona Gold palette has apparently been discontinued, and I was hoping to make this video after it had been discontinued, but before it had sold out everywhere, sort of as like a, if you're thinking of panic buying it because it's about to be out of stock, let me help you talk yourself down off that ledge kind of thing. Like going over it, having owned it for years, telling you how it's gone over the years and why I'm not buying a backup and all of that stuff. But I just checked, I think when I first planned this video a week or two ago, when I first started thinking about it and put it in my production schedule for YouTube, it was still available on Beautylish. It had sold out in Sephora, but it was still available on a lot of sites. I just checked and it seems like it's not available anywhere except for like on Poshmark and stuff. So it might be that it's over, like the Natasha Denona Gold palette, it's gone forever. When I post this video, I will do a little bit of research, and if I can find it for sale anywhere, I will link it down below. But I'm gonna go through, I'm still gonna make the video I was planning to do. I'm gonna go through, I'm just gonna talk to you about how it's gone between me and this, in many ways, very well-loved palette, but in some ways, actually, spoiler alert, kind of underused palette. I have a little bit of mixed feelings now that it's all said and done and it's the end of the movie. And I'm going to tell you all about them. And hopefully this will help to alleviate or possibly even neutralize the sting. If you're someone who always wanted this and now you've missed out on it and you're kind of feeling bad about it, or you're scrambling thinking maybe you should buy it secondhand or something like that, I'm here to kind of bring some realism into this atmosphere of FOMO. And as I go through the gold palette and talk to you about what it is that I actually do with it in real life, I'll be giving you alternatives. So other products that you might already have or that are still on the market that you could use to do what one does with the gold palette. If this is your first time to my channel, then welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Hannah and I really love beautiful things, but I try not to buy too much. And I always try to bring the atmosphere of realism. No, what did I say? I always try to bring the realism into the atmosphere of FOMO. I think a lot of times we do end up scrambling to panic buy makeup because we want to hop on the trend or we don't want to miss out or something. I think it's way better to slow down, take a deep breath, and just buy what you know you're really gonna love. So if that sounds good to you, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. And let's go ahead and get into the meat of the video. I received this palette as a Christmas gift from my sister at the end of 2018. So I've had it for going on 3 years, right? 2021 is the third year that I've had this palette. And as you can see, I've used some of the shades a lot. These shades that I use a lot are featured heavily on my channel because I'm always popping shades out of this palette and using them to build custom palettes. That's like my favorite way of interacting with my eyeshadow collection these days. You guys see me do a lot of that. What I don't talk about very often is that there are a lot of shades in this palette that I almost never use, that are actually almost untouched. Like literally almost untouched. So I'm going to go through and tell you what I love about it first. We'll get that out of the way. But for each thing that I love about it, I'm going to tell you what you could use instead and what I sometimes do use instead. Then I'm going to tell you what I don't love about it. And then I'm going to tell you why I didn't buy a backup, even though I had plenty of advance warning and these two shades are about to be completely panned. And speaking of these two shades, Sparks and Kava, they are definitely the number one thing that I love about the gold palette. 2 out of the 15 shades in this palette are a formula that I find incredibly useful. It's a sheer eyeshadow with really, really fine glitter that makes the surface of the skin look wet. I love using them as a topper. So I'll put like a darker shadow all over my lids and into the crease of my eye, and then pat one of these two shades all over it, and it gives that almost like glossy lid look, like almost as though you've used a face gloss or something. It's that editorial eye look, really, really gleamy and shiny, especially under kind of low or uneven light. I also love to take a sheer wet look shade all the way up past the crease of my eye, past the edge of my eyeshadow, all the way up to my brows, so that the brow gleams wetly as my brows are doing today. And I did indeed put this shade, Kava, all the way up to my brow bone today to get it to shine like that. And it's nice because you can bring that shine down over the rest of the shadow so that the blend looks very smooth. And this is my jam, this kind of wet look eye. So almost every time I do my eyeshadow, whether it's for filming or for just hanging out, just a day around the house, going out with friends, almost anything, I finish it off with a shadow like this, just putting like a gloss all over the entire lid, no matter what's underneath it. So that's a convenient thing for me since I do have the palette. But here's the thing, though, that formula, that kind of shadow is in no way unique to Natasha Denona or unique to the gold palette. There are so many other options just in my collection, and there are a lot of options on the market. One of them is the Fenty Beauty Diamond Balm Highlighter. The Diamond Balm Highlighter is basically like a big giant pan of Natasha Denona sparks. They look really similar in the pan. They perform in an incredibly similar way. Like it's an eyeshadow that looks kind of invisible from some angles, but then when you turn it and it catches the light, it really shines and it looks wet. This was an innovative highlighter to the market because it's basically a clear, dry balm with glitters suspended in it. And that's exactly what these eyeshadows are. So you can use this the same way. You can tap it all over the lid to finish an eye look. You can put it on the brow bone to help blend the edges of an eye look. And I have used this product that way. Whenever I'm using this on my cheeks, I just bring it up onto my eyes. If you've been wishing you had the gold palette because you want to do what I do and make your eyes look sort of drenched with one of those glossy toppers, but you happen to have How Many Carats from Fenty, then you can just do the same thing with How Many Carats. You don't need the gold palette. Another fabulous alternative in terms of how wet it ends up looking is Space Cowboy, the single eyeshadow from Urban Decay. It has a little bit of grunge and color in it in a way that Sparks definitely doesn't, and not even Kava does. They're both a little bit more clear than this, but especially when it's buffed out, you can absolutely get that same wetness. It's that same kind of like very, very sheer, clear, super reflective, glossy editorial lid. And I find myself reaching for this almost as much as I reach for either of these ones from Natasha Denona. And this is pretty new to me, like just maybe a month old, but I bet that within the year, it's going to look the way that these two look, because I've basically transferred my affections to it. My most used alternative to that kind of wet look shade is the top of the Tom Ford Cream and Powder in the shade Naked Bronze. This has as much pan on it as either Sparks or Kava. And I think that I kind of like it better because Kava from the gold palette is definitely bronzy, and Sparks is really, really white and bright. And this is kind of in between. It sort of has that like silvery gold. It's more neutral than either one of them. Sometimes when I want to finish an eye look with a wet look shade like this, like a sheer shiny topper, I open the gold palette and I look at it and I'm like, which one do I want to use? Sparks seems like it's too icy, it's too white. Kava seems like it's a little too bronzy, too warm. And then I close the gold palette and I go for this and I use this one instead because it always works. It's always perfect. So these two shades are definitely my favorite thing about the gold palette, but what they do, the way that they perform, the function that they serve, isn't unique to the market and isn't unique to my collection either. I think that the thing that I love about this, the second best, my second favorite thing about it, is this shadow right here. It's called Varus, and I love it because it's such a neutral bronze. It's almost dusty, and it can be difficult to find a bronze that doesn't actually lean copper. For example, the other bronze looking shade in here looks like a really bright copper gold when you swatch it. This to me is a true bronze. It's basically a shiny brown. Since I swatched and compared all of the bronze eyeshadows in my collection, and I will try to remember to link that video down below in case you want to watch and you haven't seen it. Since I did that and realized that this is pretty much my favorite, like my truest bronze, I've been using it a lot. So whenever I just want to do a basic bronze eye, I default to this and reach for it. But you can see that even though I use it a lot, it doesn't even have like a quarter as much wear in it as these two sheer toppers on the top that I'm reaching for all the time. I consider this to be one of my favorite eyeshadows and one of my most used eyeshadows in my collection, but even in that case, I still haven't used it all that much. And it's not the only thing that I own that could serve the purpose. Another fantastic option is the cream shadow in the bottom half of the Tom Ford Cream and Powder in Naked Bronze. And here's the thing, y'all. My look with the gold palette is almost always Varus all over the lid, a little bit of a dark brown in the outer corner, the dark brown in the gold palette, and then either Kava or Sparks all over the eye and all over the brow bone. That's like 90% of the time what I do if I'm doing a gold palette look. I just use this plain bronze, this plain dark brown, and one of these shiny toppers. And I can get the same look with Tom Ford Naked Bronze. And it's just this one little thing, right? This all over the lid, then this all over the lid on top of it. And then if I really am doing the most and going for something smoky, any dark brown or black in the outer corner to make the look smokier. And I look exactly like I have the gold palette on my eyes. So again, even though I really love this shade and I enjoy using it because I have this palette, it is in no way unique to my collection, and it's definitely not unique to the market. This is also not the only alternative that I have. I find that either one of these bronze shades in the Rowan 75 Degrees warm palette works for the same kind of look, and that they're really textured and fun. I recently acquired this ZC palette, and it has this amazing sort of smoky version of a bronze in it. I really love the look. When I tested this palette the first time, I put this all over my lids and then I put this flaky gold on top of it, and I felt like I looked exactly like I was wearing the gold palette, like an elaborate look with the gold palette. I have a number of bronze and bronze adjacent shadows in my singles. And you know, it's the kind of shadow that shows up in a lot of neutral palettes. Like it's just the kind of thing that's out there. It's not incredibly unique. It's just incredibly useful to have one that's right in the center of neutral. So yeah, it's my second favorite thing about the gold palette, this shade, but it's not as though only it will do. My third favorite thing about the palette, and this is, am I boring? Is the moral of the story just that I'm boring? The gold palette's being discontinued and I'm boring. A video by Hannah Louise Poston. My third favorite thing about the gold palette is this dark brown. I use a neutral, richly pigmented dark brown like this in my outer corner all the time. And this is one of the ones that I use the most. I'm always popping it out of its spot here in the gold palette and putting it into a custom palette. I frequently reach for the gold palette just for this shade because I know that it's a really reliable formula, this matte formula from Natasha Denona. And if I need a dark brown and I just am grabbing for anything that comes to hand, I often think of this one first, either this one or the one in the Persona Cosmetics Identity 2 palette, which is a little bit warmer. So I don't feel like it's a direct perfect alternative. I always get a little bit warmer of a look with that one, but it's just another super pigmented dark brown. So because I have a dark brown Natasha Denona shade, and I really love the formula, it's super pigmented, it's usually my top choice when I'm reaching for something like that. But is it the only choice for a dark brown? In no way. Like in no way at all is it the only choice. There's so many dark brown shadows in my collection. I have singles. There's one here in this ZC palette actually. It works really well. That's another reason that I felt like I was kind of wearing a gold palette dupe when I had the ZC palette on the other day because I was able to put this in the outer corner. If you have a Pat McGrath palette, you have a dark brown like this. If you have almost any, like the Natasha Denona Bronze palette, the Natasha Denona Glam palette, or a dupe for any of those palettes, you have a shade like this. It would just be ridiculous to buy the gold palette for a dark brown. I wouldn't do that, and I wouldn't recommend doing that. And, you know, it would be, because of that, ridiculous to pine away for the gold palette because of a dark brown. But it's my third favorite thing about the palette. It's the third most useful thing about it. So that should tell you something. That's what I'm trying to say. My fourth favorite thing about the palette is this really, really creamy, crushy, shiny, greeny bronze, which is called Brass. I just absolutely love the texture of it. But this is another one that it's really, really easy to find alternatives to. The one that springs immediately to mind is 365. Is that what it's called? Yeah, 365, which is a JD Glow shade. I mean, look how similar those are. You can't even tell which one is which. If this is what you want, and this is what I have on my lids, like what's giving my lids that gold palette shine. You know what I mean? Like you look at me and you're like, are you wearing the gold palette today? The thing that's making that happen on my lids is this shade. It's brass. It's like on the center. It is definitely compelling. And I love this look. I really, really love adding this shadow to the center of a look. So I'm not saying that it's no great shakes, because I really do think it is. It's just, if this is what you want, if you've always dreamed of having those gold palette eyes, and if you think about it and you realize that when you have had that dream, this is what you've dreamed of, like this effect, this color, then just go support an independent Black-owned business and buy 365 from JD Glow. It's like this big, beautiful round pan, absolutely luscious. You will never regret it. And you can combine this with the dark browns you already have and the sheer wet look shades you already have and the bronzes that you already have, and you can get that gold palette glow. And then lastly, my fifth and final thing that I like about the gold palette, the only other thing that I like about it, is this matte mustard right here. And it's weird because I don't use it very often. Like, I actually almost never use it. I don't particularly relish what it adds to looks, or like want it for what it adds to looks. I just really like the way that it looks when it's in eyeshadow palettes. So I like this as a single. I'm often adding this to palettes because I love the velvety texture of the pan and the slightly greenish mustard. But you know, if this is a shade that you think you'd use a lot, because I don't recommend buying a shadow for that reason, or buying a palette for a shadow that would serve that purpose. It's just there to look pretty. I do like using it on my eyes. I sometimes use it on my eyes, but I don't use it as much as I thought I was going to. Actually, when I wanted this palette and I put it on my Christmas wish list all those years ago, this was one of the things that I felt like was the most exciting about it. And it is an exciting shade. I'm just telling you, I'm here to report back 3 years later. In practice, I just don't use it that much. It's partly because I don't use mattes that much, but it's also because it's sort of this funny greenish yellow shade, and it doesn't fit in very frequently with what I'm planning to do, with like the look that I'm trying to get on my lids. Because if I'm trying to deepen up the look on the outer corner and the crease, it's like it's not dark enough. And if I'm trying to blend from my crease out into my skin tone, it's not light enough. I don't know, I feel like when the gold palette was first released, everyone's eyes fell out of their head when they saw that shade, which is called Dijon. But since then, a bunch of brands have featured colors like that in a bunch of palettes. So I know that Melt has done it a bunch of times. I think the Smoke Sessions palette, for one, has a shade like that. There's even, I'm just looking at my singles right in front of me, there's even ColourPop Paper Tiger, which is a bit lighter and more yellow, but can do something really similar. I actually find this, even though on site I don't like it as much, I actually find it more useful in a look than the one from Natasha Denona. If that's what you're after, if that's what you always wanted from this palette, and you're just, shedding a tear right now that you can't get this one, there's definitely if you really, really want that shade, I'm sure that you can find something on the market, or probably in your own collection, that will serve the same purpose. But my actual feedback about this shade is that even though it's my fifth favorite thing about the palette, I almost never use it. Now let's talk about all the things I don't love about the palette. First of all of these mattes that are pretty much the same, this one, and this one, these three warm-toned sandy shades, I don't love how warm-toned they are. They all look orange on me. They always go orange on me. They're not neutral. They look kind of neutral, but they're not. They're like orange. They're like desert sand orange. And they all look the same. I mean, they're not exactly the same, but on the eyes, when it comes to practical use, they all look the same. And that's so frustrating. I look at this palette and I see, like, when it comes to matte blending out crease shades for me, I just have these three options, which is really just one option, and it's actually not a good option. I don't particularly love any of those shades. And if I need a neutral pale matte, I often find myself going to a different palette, even when I'm using this palette to create a look, or when I'm using shadows from this palette to create a look. These shiny shades down here at the bottom, I find they are so coppery gold, so bright yellowy gold. And it's just a much more distinctive look on me than I'm often wanting. It's not neutral on me. They're so bright and so orangey yellowy that it looks like I'm wearing yellow when I wear them. And again, they're very beautiful shades, and it's not as though I don't use them. I used one of them on my eyes today. You can see there's kind of this like copper, underlying copper tinge to my look, it's because I use one of these shades. But I can't use these shades, which are supposed to be sort of just different shades of gold. I can't use them without my eyes looking orange, orange, orange. So it's not my favorite thing. And then this super yellow gold in the very center, same thing. It's just such a strong color. It's so yellow. It's not neutral. And yeah, it's definitely like a super yellow gold, but that it's exactly that. It's a super yellow gold. So it's very, very golden. It's very bright and attractive. I just almost never use it because it's such a strong statement. It's such a strong addition to a look, and it totally overwhelms. Lime Chrome, which is this shade in the upper right-hand corner that everyone was also bananas over. This is now a dime a dozen in the makeup world. When this came out, the only thing that was similar to it that I could think of was ColourPop Tea Garden. I think it was pretty similar to this. And I thought when I first got this that this was sort of like Tea Garden on steroids. And it kind of is, but over the years, it's kind of gotten hard pan on it. It isn't as creamy as some of the other shiny shades in this palette. And I just don't reach for it particularly often. It also is so green, and it makes a look really, really green. And I've learned over the years that if I'm building like a multi-dimensional sparkly bronze look, I often regret it if I add a shade that is shiny and has a really strong green flip or a really strong blue flip, like a cool toned flip. I'll often regret it because then I end up looking like a really colorful or green or blue eye look when I was going for something a little bit more grounded and neutral. So, Lime Chrome, yeah, the whole palette is very beautiful and cohesive, and I love the way that it works together. I just don't particularly love Lime Chrome as much as I thought that I would, and I haven't used it very much. And lastly, these blues. It's such a cool aspect of this palette that it has these peacock blues in it. It's really, really cool. But again, they're almost untouched. I almost never use them. This one, I almost never use the cream to powder matte because I find the cream to powder formula honestly kind of difficult to work with. It has like all of the drawbacks of a cream without the benefits of a cream. I just never get a really good blend from it. I shy away from it a little bit. It doesn't have the satisfying, like soft, crushy, velvety quality of a powder shadow where you can like pick up powder onto your brush and have like particles of powder coating your brush, and then manipulate them on your eyes. It doesn't have that because it's got this creamy kind of set quality, but it also doesn't have the satisfying like actual physical cream quality of a cream where you have three-dimensional gobs of stuff that you can like place onto your eyes and smear out, and then it'll set on your eyes like the Tom Ford. It doesn't have that either. It has this sort of thin quality that comes from the fact that it doesn't have a powdery quality. I much prefer, if I want to do a look with a shadow that color, I much prefer one of the shades from the Kaleidos Club Nebula palette, Queen of Blades, which is pretty much exactly the same color. And this is a formula that I like way, way better than the Natasha Denona cream to powder. And this sparkly one, it's weird. It's like too sheer, but then it has this black base. So you try to blend it out and it gets like blackened underneath and sometimes kind of uneven. And it never ends up being either that sparkly, either that shiny. It's a cool shade. I mean, it's definitely grungy and different, sort of editorial. It's just I'm never quite satisfied with the look that I get, and I just don't use it very often. Now, I don't want you to think that I don't love the gold palette, because I do. It's one of the most memorable and greatest gifts that I've ever gotten. I really do love owning it. I love my gold palette, my one, this one right here that my sister gave to me. This one that has pan on these two shades. This one that I've messed around where this shade has fallen out of its pan 50 times and I've had to repress it. Like this physical object that I received as a gift, I love, I enjoy using, and I'm really happy that I have it. So I'm not saying that it has disappointed me bitterly or that I don't feel the love for it that I feel for my favorite belongings, because it is one of my favorite pieces of makeup and I do feel that love and that joy. I'm just trying to point out to you that there's a big difference between the fantasy and the reality. And the reality is that 90 or 95% of the time when I sit down and I use the gold palette, even though I'm getting a lot of pleasure out of using my gold palette, the look that I end up having on my eyes, the way that I end up looking, is a look that you can probably already create at home using what you have. Or maybe if you don't happen to have like any wet look shades, or you happen to not have literally any sparkly golds, you could get one single, or like one thing, or, you know, one thing, and then you could be on your way to creating that look. That's the reality. It's not a magic bullet. It's not one of its kind. It's not going to elevate your makeup game in and of itself. The color story has really inspired me. Those sheer shiny toppers have really inspired me. But you can take inspiration from something and then do the art that you are inspired to do using different tools. And I've actually said before on my channel that in spite of how much I love it, and this still holds true, that in spite of how much I have loved using it, if I lost my gold palette, I wouldn't replace it. I wouldn't buy it again. And that's just because it's so expensive. It's just like a really expensive palette. And I'm aware, having owned it, having loved it, having gotten a ton of use out of it, I'm aware that even though it's a pleasure for me to use, it doesn't provide me something that I can't get elsewhere. So if I lost it all of this time, all through these 3 years that I've had it, if I had ever lost it, I would have just transferred my use of it to other things. I would have kept doing the same eye looks, but I would have been using different tools. And then I would be saving myself the $125 that I would have had to spend if I decided to replace it with another gold palette. That has been my relationship this entire time. An appreciation for the third of it that I use a lot, but not a dependence on it. And that makes it really easy to decide not to buy a backup. For one thing, like even though these two shades are almost used up, none of the other ones are. So I would basically be spending $125 just to replace these two eyeshadows. And then I would be getting doubles of all of these other eyeshadows. And that's just not something that I would do. Even if I didn't have these other things in my collection that can serve the same purpose as these two, even then I wouldn't do it, because nothing is permanent. Like life goes on and things change. You use up your stuff. You do your makeup one way for a while. You depend on this one lipstick or lip liner or eyeshadow for, I don't know, 3 years, 5 years, however long it lasts, and then you use it up. And if you can't replace it, you find something else and you use it. And maybe your style changes, maybe the way that you look changes a little bit, but it's okay. I feel like there's this sense sometimes in the makeup community that once you find something that works perfectly, you have to never be without it. You have to hold on to it and never let it go because you've reached your pinnacle of perfection. Your skin looks perfect, or your eyes look perfect, or that color is the only one that's ever going to be more perfect than all the other colors on you. So you can't be without it. You have to have backups. And if it gets discontinued, you have to have 3 in your drawer but it's just like, why? I think that perfection of a tool like makeup, like a certain kind of product or a certain color being better than all the rest, and the one that you have to use if you're gonna succeed at being perfect, which you'd better or you'll be a failure. Like that kind of way of thinking about makeup products is one of the premises that the beauty industry depends on to keep us spending our money. And it's just false. It's a false premise. You're gonna be great no matter what you have on your eyes or your lips. You're gonna do it. You're gonna live your life. You're gonna be beautiful. You're gonna do the things that you're setting out to do. I think sometimes we want to believe that only this one thing is perfect. Like you want to believe that the gold palette is literally going to change your life and change your face and heal you. Like we want to believe it, because if you believe that that's true, then it's really easy to get your life changed and to get healed. All you have to do is spend $125 and get this thing in your hands. So if you buy into that lie, if you believe that a piece of makeup is going to be the missing piece in your life, it's going to make you happy, even though it causes you to panic when that thing is going out of stock or is being discontinued, there's still like a comfort in believing that lie, because it's easier. You know what I mean? Like it's easier to buy something than to pursue your dreams, risk failing, try again, heal yourself from the inside out by learning how to meditate, by becoming more compassionate, by taking a deep breath and responding with love, even when someone is cruel to you. You know, like the really hard things that really do transform your life and heal you and give you joy and actually make you happy. It would be really convenient if we didn't have to do those and all we had to do was buy an eyeshadow palette, you know? But it just doesn't work that way. As someone who has had the eyeshadow palette now for 3 years, I can tell you, it just doesn't work that way. All I got from it was the ability to do eye looks that I really love, that I could also do with other things that I also have. So if you have it, if you bought it because it was being discontinued, or if you've already had it for a while and it brings you joy, that is great. I'm so happy for you. I mean, it brings me joy. And so I'm happy for all of us. But if you didn't buy it, if you missed it, if you missed out on it, or if you can't afford to buy it right now and so you just watched it slip away because it was discontinued and it sold out, don't worry. Even though it does bring me joy, it's not the source of joy. It isn't what makes my life joyful. And it wouldn't be the source of joy for you either. It might bring you some joy, but it wouldn't be the source of your joy. The source of your joy is you. And you will find other ways to spark that joy with other beautiful products, with other makeup. You'll find other ways to do the eye looks, do the makeup that bring you joy in the way that it would have. If you need something actionable, I encourage you to dupe the vibes. And if you've never heard me say that before, I'll briefly explain it. Duping the vibes is looking at a picture of a piece of makeup, usually an eyeshadow palette that you don't own, and then pretending that you own it and you're about to put it on your eyes. But, you know, since you don't have it, instead of reaching for the shadows that you see in the picture, you reach for things that you already own, the closest thing that you can find. And then you get the pleasure of making the decisions that you would make if you had the palette before you, trying things out, getting a chance to see how you would look in the combination of colors that are in the palette, but just using what you already have, your best approximation of it. And I find that in every case, I was about to say almost every case, but it's actually in absolutely every case, I'm fully satisfied when I dupe the vibes. I never dupe the vibes and then I think, gosh, this wasn't enough for me. I really need to go buy that thing. Always what happens is I dupe the vibes and I'm like, I love what I own so much and I'm able to do so many beautiful eye looks with it. Why did I ever think that I needed more? So especially if you already have even a relatively robust collection of eyeshadow palettes or eyeshadow singles, try duping the vibes with the gold palette. I'll also link below all of the alternatives that I talked about in this video and more. I'm hoping to film some B-roll footage. And if I end up swatching anything in the B-roll footage that I didn't talk about out loud, I will link those things down below too. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video. What can I say? I know that this probably made more sense to some of you than others and was more directed at some of you than others. But I did feel like I needed to make it because it's an interesting position to be in. Like I feel very clearly that it's been nice to have, but I'm totally okay with letting it go. And I had not a single moment of panic or sadness when I found out it was being discontinued. I was like, oh, interesting, you know? But then I've been flooded with all of these messages from people saying like, your favorite palette's being discontinued, run for the hills, like it's an emergency. So I felt like I needed to make a video explaining why it's not an emergency for me and why it doesn't need to be an emergency for you. All right, it's time for you to go. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope that you are taking extra good care of yourself so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.